was just dancing like a madman. I had, in this dance, again and again, I was crying, and I couldn't stop crying. It was just I was shedding tears, and with the tears, I was shedding fears and thoughts. I was basically dancing myself free into the here and now. That's, I guess, for me, that seems to point to essence, the sense of feeling one with the world around me, either with a place or things around my own experience, in my experience, or people.
Welcome everyone to today's podcast episode of Essence. Today I have the honor to have with me Oliver Euchner. Oliver is an accredited 5 Rhythms teacher, trained by 5 Rhythms founder Gabriel Roth and her son, Jonathan Horan. His approach includes various movement meditation practices and yoga. And currently he lives in Berlin and contributes to the local urban community building scene. So welcome, Oliver, to today's podcast episode.
Hi, John. Thank you for having me.
And as I invite every guest on this podcast in the very beginning, I also, before starting the recording, asked Oliver to connect with the last situation that he felt connected to his essence. I haven't heard it yet. I'm really excited about it. So Oliver, if you want, you can take us to this moment and describe a little bit what it was and how you felt.
Well, thank you for opening that. In fact, I still am kind of under the impression of that experience, which happened yesterday at a gathering, a community gathering, at a place in Berlin called the Church of Interbeing, which, of course, you know. And the situation was such that we had in this gathering a large circle of people, were maybe 80 people or so. And we were, there were 2 musicians. I was there as a guest, and there were 2 musicians who were just contributing live music. And as they were starting, the invitation to the people in the room was to move, to dance. And it was clear that the music kind of needed something. It was 2 guitars and 2 voices only for 80 people in a church. It kind of was, it was beautiful, but it kind of was thin. And I just happened so that I had my drum with me. I have I play percussion and have various percussion instruments. And when I go to this place, I always bring, most of the times anyway, I bring a drum with me. And so it was just at the, improvisationally, it seemed like this could help. And so I motioned to one of the musicians who noticed me going to standing up and going for my drum. And he confirmed. And so I just rushed up, joined these 2 musicians. And together we were, we hadn't practiced the music that they were playing. It was just an improvisational situation. And it was so clear and evident, this path was opening up to play music together, to improvise. And it just, it synced. It just fell right into place. And so the place started to transform. People were starting to dance more and more intensely, more and more wildly. And it was this experience of essential in that way, in that, I came to a place in which I was just following the energy in the room, what wanted to happen, and became an instrument myself, together with these other 2 musicians and all the dancers in the room, to kind of celebrate the moment as it was. And it was just this building energy that was full of inspiration, joy, and intensity in the end. It was it was almost like a dry kindling that was put on fire. It just really exploded in the most beautiful way. And it was this feeling of being one with everybody else. It was this feeling of coming into this non-separate part inside myself, where we all kind of feel the same. And that's, I guess, for me, that seems to point to essence, the sense of feeling one with the world around me, either with a place or with things around my own experience, in my experience, or people. And it was this full-bodied experience that kind of lasted, not even 5 minutes, but it was a moment of joy that took us all by the hand.
Thank you for sharing this experience and for letting us in into this moment. And I find it so beautiful what you shared. This listening, becoming an instrument and listening to the group feel, listening to what wants to happen, and then becoming one with the music and with the dancers, making this a dialogue. And I resonate so deeply with it, especially because the two of us, I remember that we are also playing drums together to a group field in one of your 5 rhythms workshops and sessions that you gave, and it was so beautiful. And so I deeply resonate with what you are sharing, and can imagine that so well in this beautiful church, 80 people being there and having this conversation from body to body, listening, following, moving, and merging. And I wanted to ask you as well, as you've been sharing that you play the drums, maybe you want to share also a little bit with people that are listening, what else you do in this context of movement, of body and dance, because I find this approach and angle so interesting to understand how people can connect with their essence through movement and through dance.
Glad to. Thank you. That's really a very kind segue, because how much I'm at home in movement practices, and so and I teach 5 rhythms, which is this embodied dance improvisation, really meditation practice, a movement practice that brings together meditation and movement. And so what I do is, besides teaching, of course, I can only really teach if I'm connected to the experience itself. And so I dance regularly. And it was a time when I kind of, for a while, I wasn't dancing regularly, and I could really feel that it was difficult to teach without having the experience in my body. The teaching kind of became flat. It was just circumstances that made it difficult for me to practice myself. But so this is how I get into my movement experience, essential self-healing. The different, I can either go to a class or to a workshop where people teach what I teach, or I can find different ways. I dance by myself at home, and go to various conscious dance events in wherever I am. So what happens in that practice is, the best way to go get into this practice and to go deep into it is to get out of the way of myself. It seems kind of, because there's so much that one can be given, at first counterintuitive to not do something in particular, to not find a to do, an action, a kind of something that feels like a work or an effort. So what's counterintuitive is to do a non-effort in order to get somewhere. right? And so and that because so at the beginning of each of these sessions, I need to find my way into this non-efforting, this availing myself to be given something that I don't know yet and of which I don't know how to pursue it. In fact, the whole idea or the whole move that's required is to to not know and to just be receptive in that way, to kind of see, okay, what can take me, what can take me, how can I be gifted, how can I have empty hands, how can I allow myself to not know. And so I the start of this experience for me is to accept where I am and do it in a physical way. So, if I feel tired, for example, or if my spirit is kind of not quite there yet, if I'm agitated because of city traffic or taking the subway, or if there's another emotional thing that's preoccupying me, I kind of just let it be. I'm in a room and start moving in any which way. In the beginning, I'm not. It's just I wouldn't call it arbitrary, but it's literally just trusting that once you start moving, things will develop. And so, out of this simple movement, without it having to have a certain look or feel, together with the music, there's a process starting to happen. And it's inevitably the relation that happens between my body and the music, and between me witnessing what is happening, that something is being generated. And so it's just this kind of the relating state, to come into relationship, is what is a creative process. And then, with depending on the music, this is easier or less easy. And so really every time, regardless of how I feel in the beginning, of how my body feels in the beginning, of what I'm thinking in the beginning, once I give this material into movement and expressing it, just finding in the beginning ways that may be awkward to give expression to what's inside of me, to my experience. There's kind of a feedback from that takes my system through my body onto a journey. And in it is unknown, it's different every time, unknown unfoldings. So by giving myself over, it's almost like coming to a natural state, where I'm kind of shedding these preoccupations, these mechanical thinkings. The mind kind of has a different quality when you start moving. It's less controlled. And by softening that control, it's almost like my whole system is relieved. And out of this relief sense, there's almost like a graceful gratitude, beauty. My body is telling me, my system is telling me, finally we get a break from your controlling mind. Finally, we get a break from the incessant control. And the body does it in beautiful ways. It plays back this being relieved into with beauty and movement, and getting more and more into it. The more it has this experience, the more gratitude it seems to have, and the more graceful it starts to move. And it's this interesting thing where this beauty comes about with me not chasing it. And so when I say beauty, what I mean is there's kind of this the sensation beauty inside, where if you feel really yummy, like if you are caressed by something, or if you're at the sea in the summer in warm water, and you feel the soft touch of it, and maybe the water's green and the sky is blue, and there's there's wind that sort of, caresses your body. You kind of feel the sense of well-being. And my body gets the equivalent of that through the music. It becomes a sensual experience where I'm touched by the music and by where I'm touched by my movement. So all of a sudden, these movements have sensations inside that have a certain feel. So it's almost like I'm starting to massage and caress myself through the movements on the outside. And I can feel them, inside my heart, my physical heart. I get a smile in my face. And, when you get a smile in your face, it kind of, there's all kinds of hormonal things that are happening. And so it's this getting into relationship with my own physical embodied experience and the emotional experience that goes along with it. And the mind all of a sudden frees up and finds its place by witnessing it all and noticing details about it. And it's like, when you write associatively or when you start drawing, all of a sudden when beauty comes and good sensations and feelings come, your body responds to that. And it's like this feedback starts to contribute thoughts that are beautiful. And so this process, I guess you get the gist of it. This process is deepening and is evolving and is growing in that way. So, and of course, this practice that I'm practicing, the 5 rhythms, has this intelligence about this being a process and has these 5 different phases that build on each other to take you deeper and higher into that process as the music gets more intense. It kind of picks you up carefully and slowly and gently. It and leads you into this experience with gradual intensification of the music. And so this is the experience that is going on inside of me and outside directly of my body, but with many people in the room, ideally in a class. The inspiration, is not just with my own movement and experience, but with the movement and experience, the positions, the creativity, the originality of the movements around me that kind of, put more wood into the fire of the experience. And so in the same way that my own experience has this intensification for myself, these different members in the room become a part of an organism that feeds the collective experience together. So that too grows. And it's kind of this, I think the analogy to fire is maybe helpful because it's like this, the intensity grows, the fire spreads to crescendo. And in this experience, you could easily happen if it weren't for a container that has been around for a while and the wisdom that goes into how to hold the container and how to, over time, when I say over time, Stock Rhythms practice has been around for, I think, since the early 80s. So almost not quite 50 years, more than 40 years. So in this practice, what happens is these places of, or these states of intensity, you could also call them ecstasy. They're being they're in a context and integrated into a healing experience. So this ecstasy is happening not because of the of the incredible high that you're getting from it, but to experience a part of oneself that is natural and doesn't really have much room elsewhere to be expressed and experienced. And it being part of a process, not the goal itself, this ecstatic experience is being followed by an integrational phase, which, after this kind of build-up that I was just describing, there's often an acknowledgement of the experience so that you're not just in the experience, but you kind of let the experience come to a natural close or natural ending and then taking and continuing to express the experience and what is being witnessed at that point through movement. This intensity is being allowed to land and to soften and to kind of find an arc towards toward the ground. It's grounding, and so oftentimes it's kind of in that experience, it's as a poetic quality that brings this process to an end into a quiet stillness moment, which is then also in an outer way easily recognizable as meditative. You notice the movements become less, and they become an expression of the essence of spaciousness, to kind of the, that's the part in us that is witnessing. We could call it the light of consciousness, that is relating to the whole experience as something to behold and to let kind of settle inside. So this is, in a nutshell, a description of this physical experience, just with my words, which don't give it entire justice because it's so physical inside and out.
Yeah, thank you for sharing this and for letting us in. And I feel so deeply your passion for it. I feel that there's so much richness and abundance in the experience that you described. And from what you shared, there's such a huge variety already of things to tap into and to look into even deeper. And I was wondering now, when people are listening, they're like, wow, this sounds amazing. I want to experience this. How did you get on this path? Like, I'm curious about like your journey getting there, to get to experience this in such a rich and deep way. Did you just grow up as a dancer and it's only for people that have been dancing for their whole life, or what has your journey been?
Well, as your question is taking me back to when I first met this practice, and I'm feeling this this tingling and these memories of how I was virginal to this experience. I hadn't had it yet, and when I first went into a rhythm session in New York City many years ago, I had no idea what I could expect. Just I followed the suggestion of a friend who said, "You have to check this out." And so I got into this room that was in downtown, and within a short while, the room was packed. There were many people in there. Within a short while, there was this incredible sense of coming home. Having found my home, my, should I call it spiritual home? I didn't even, it didn't come across as spiritual. It was just the sense of well-being and belonging, having found my tribe, if you will. And what happened is, in this room, people were, in the practice I was just describing, were so joyful, so intensely experiencing themselves and sharing and expressing their experience through dance movement, but also through voicing. So some people would just have sounds of joy at one point, and then the very same people at a different phase of this experience would express maybe sadness or anger or simple non-denominational intensity. So it was this incredible allowing of these different parts that people had and making art of it, art that just transformed again and again and again and again, There was this incredible vortex of creativity that was unfolding. It was so intense. I remember this was in the summer, that in the air from the sweat that people sweated, that the walls were dripping with sweat, and that on the floor were puddles of sweat that had to be swept up during the dance so that people wouldn't slip. The music was unbelievable. It wasn't club music. It was music that was had an incredible breath. So there was everything in it that was weaved together. There was there was club dance music, as well as beautiful lyrical music with with strings. There was spiritual music, but there also was rock and roll. There was house music. There was hip hop. There was maybe a techno piece in it. It was such a freedom of different music that served. The only thing that this music had in common, these music pieces had in common, is that they served the journey of people dancing deeper into themselves. So, when I went there in the beginning, the immediacy of the experience, no surprise. I went back and back and back and back and back and back and back. At first once a week, then twice a week, and at the end 3 times a week, because it was such a regeneration, especially living in New York City, which is so intense with a lot of tension, and requires such like it doesn't let up. You always need to be on, and you always need to watch what you're doing, and watch where you're walking, and watch your money, because it's so expensive. This kind of tension that is common to the experience of living in New York, it neutralized through the stance. So it was a very healthy thing to do, for my psychological hygiene, for my physical dexterity, for my physical strength, and for my inspiration. So I just kept on going. And in the beginning, I remember a year or two, I refused to learn these 5 simple rhythms. I didn't want to commit to memory the names of the faces of this dance, because I so much appreciated the immediacy, the non-verbal, non-mental quality of it, that I allowed myself. It was an intentional, willful ignorance about any intellectual background or philosophy that this practice has, because the experience of the practice itself was more than enough. And so it just, it went deep into my nervous system in that way. That those my dances were unbelievable. What came out of me, and soon enough, I was screaming too. Soon enough, my sweat was running down endlessly. Soon enough, I had a smile on my face that wouldn't go away after the class. And soon enough, I would really connect with these crazy people in social ways too. So it became this whole world, that was very satisfying. And the community was incredibly interesting and diverse. They just being New York City, there were lawyers, there were artists, dancers, business people, hippies, but hippies who had a job, who needed to have a job in order to survive. So it was a very rich communal experience too, because all of these people, they had this in common and got along and would meet after dances, before dances, and then otherwise too. So it was this, on so many levels, such a beautiful experience with myself, with a whole new tribe of people, and with an outlook that changed, an outlook on life that changed. So, even difficult situations had a way to be expressed and to be transformed through this practice. That's how I found my way to it.
It sounds like it was very enriching for you on many levels, like the emotional level, the physical level, the spiritual level, the community, like how it sounds like you've met yourself in a deeper way and just got hooked like on this. Yes, I need more of this.
Yeah.
And Yeah, I also wanted to ask you, like, now you give classes and workshops on a regular basis for many years in many different parts of this planet. Uh, what was it that you were doing before committing to, I want to share more of this with the world? And what made you decide to actually, I want to teach this and I want to share classes on a regular level? Like what were you doing before and what made this shift for you?
Mm. Well, what I was doing before, I was also continuing to do while I was practicing this practice, and while I was teaching it. So um, for many years, I have had my own business, and I was kind of doing transaction management for large real estate transactions um, that kind of, were transactions with sellers and buyers who were professional investors. Um, and so that required uh, a, uh, a, a business approach to real estate transactions, including doing financial analyses, technical analyses with third parties, um, being in negotiations with people who have a lot of money and or companies who invest a lot of money. So it was a very controlled, or it is a very controlled world where there's not much room for error because of just the what's at stake financially, and because of the culture that this world has. You need to be accurate, and you need to present yourself um, in a way that inspires confidence in these people to trust you in consulting them in these investments. So some of these transactions, they would go a year or longer, and so it was not just a short customer experience, but those were relationships with people over a long time. And I've been continuing to do that because for a long time I really felt it beneficial for me to not have to make money with teaching five rhythms. And I enjoyed that very much. I enjoyed being in two worlds. I enjoyed in the challenge of being in this business world while remaining related to myself. Taking these experience, and I guess it's not exactly lessons, but the uh, the harmonizing impact on my whole system and my mind from dancing, and finding a bridge to let that be present even in the business world. So the way that happened is that I focused on the relationships with the people within this business world. And so in the end, it's very much about that, to tune into what's required technically, reports financially, for people who invest, and to listen really carefully, and to anticipate. Sometimes if it's not expressed, to anticipate it just from experience, knowing what is required, was kind of the way that I approached this business world. It was not a business world; it was a relationship world. In some ways, in some ways it was the same. It was about relating and being attentive, and feeling and experiencing more than just the words of these people. And so, but what made me, that was, I guess, the answer to one of the two questions. The other question is, what did make me decide to teach was a retreat in California, a five rhythms retreat in a place called Esalen, which is this um, how should I say, this mythical place that has been at the forefront of the human potential development, I think worldwide. So, in the 50s and 60s, um, the Beatles found their way there. Fritz Perls, the founder of Gestalt therapy, developed his Gestalt therapy there. There are Aldous Huxley, was in residence there, and many other people who kind of, nowadays, uh, many of these healing modalities that are not traditional kind of holistic healing modalities are common. Everybody knows about them. But in the 50s and 60s, they weren't around yet. And so many of them found if they weren't birthed there, found a way to unfold and then continue to grow into the mainstream of society, first in the States, but then elsewhere too. So I was at that place to do a five rhythms um, retreat, I think a 5-day retreat, and we were dancing in the Aldous Huxley Hall. It was named after Aldous Huxley. So this was a difficult time during my life. I had a difficult period with the mother of my child. She and I, were fighting over our child. So it was a very stressful and painful time. And I brought, of course, this. It was present when I was in this retreat. And what happened to me was that I started to find a way to dance with these intense feelings and fears of losing my son, of the pain of uncertainty of how this would all continue. And I was just using all of these feelings inside, these difficult feelings inside, to bring to my dance. And I remember that I've danced with such intensity. It was like I found myself being in this intense trance-like, intense movement dance where I came again and again and again to my physical limits, and I broke through them. I was just dancing like a madman, and I had, in this dance, again and again, I was crying, and I couldn't stop crying. It was just I was shedding tears, and with the tears, I was shedding fears and thoughts. I was basically dancing myself free into the here and now. And it was such a powerful transformative experience because it brought me so much into both into clarity, in clarity in a deep meditative sense, in that it was clear that my thoughts and my fears weren't really contributing to the solution, because they weren't the kinds of thoughts where I, had a strategy, or where I could bring forth a healing conversation with the mother of my child. They were just, circular thoughts, ruminations, concerns, fears, projections, and I literally they became quiet. I danced them out of my system. It was kind of this somatic experience of dancing them out of my mind, out of my heart, and out of my body. And I did this, in this retreat with other people who were perfectly able to let this be. The facilitators were holding this as if it was the most normal thing to do, to kind of catalyze through dance pain without end, seemingly without end. Yeah, I got to the bottom of it. But what a container, what a practice to allow these intense feelings to be expressed and to find their way to neutralize themselves, to go into them, not to avoid them, and also not to mentalize them, but to really let them be experienced, and trust that if you do this fully, the healing is in that. The healing is in the expression of that which is painful, and that was just it wasn't just the witnessing of it in my own system, to really experience how this process can work, the potential of it, to be the beneficiary of the potential of it myself, made it very intimate for me. I had the most intimate experience of what this practice is at that retreat, and I understood what it takes to get there. Just because while I was dancing, I was let by something inside myself that knew, okay, you go deeper into it, let it really be, shake it out. I was making physical movements of releasing it, and with it, it seemed I could use my hands, going into my nervous system, extracting what was inside of it and releasing it physically with movements of release. So to add to this experience in and of itself, this place, Esalen, is, if you can picture this, it's on the cliffs between Los Angeles and San Francisco in the middle of nowhere, with a view onto the Pacific, which so reliably would bring in these huge waves. And it's a very steep cliff. So, the steepness of it goes from high up and continues underneath, submerged into to the ocean floor there. So you had this feeling of the land and water coming together in this intense way. There were whales migrating by, pelicans, and there's mineral baths at intuitive waters that you can go to early in the morning at 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock, just bathe and see these amazing animals go by and feel the Pacific. The earth is so rich there that, at one point in some of my grief moments, I was just lying flat and naked on the grass. And it was just, I could feel the earth penetrating my whole system. So this vortex, after this experience, it was not even a question. It was clear that I wanted to teach this. Or I should better say, to hold space for that experience, to help by holding space so people can go through this by themselves and connect to their own intelligence of self-healing, that this practice brings forth.
What an experience. What a transformative experience. I was really picturing while you were describing, was picturing you moving and crying and shaking and dancing it off while being close to these cliffs and this amazing view of the ocean. And I really feel how deep this might have gone for you. And especially in this challenging time, to experience how the expression of what is true and what is there for you contributed to healing. You said a sentence, paraphrased before, that healing is through the expression of what is there. Or you said expression of pain in this case. And I feel that nowadays, like this word, like healing, is being used so often, and then sometimes in a little bit inflated way. How I feel that healing is everywhere, and I wanted to ask you again, like for you, what is the healing component of movement and dance and self-expression?
Well, yeah, it's a really good question. So there is something about Gabriel Roth, the founder of this practice of the five rhythms, had this in one of her books. She kind of stated in a nonchalant way, just put the body in motion, and now I'm paraphrasing, and the body will heal itself. So there is something about coming into movement, and not just coming into movement, but staying in movement. That heals. It heals in physical elements too. If you work out, if you practice, if you walk, it's healthy, and it accelerates certain processes that are latently there in our system anyway. Our system. I think this is why we live a certain duration and can self heal. With movement, our circulation of our blood, and with it, all the things that self heal or that keep us in balance naturally. Our system is looking for health. and it always kind of tries to go there. It gets more and more difficult the more difficult we make it through outer circumstances. If there are too many things that our organism has to battle, it has its limits. It will break down, and eventually age will do that anyway. But until we die, our system has the natural wish to to sustain itself and to not just survive, but um, to be true to its essence, and that is being alive. So it's part of it has to do with that. It's just a simple movement, not just a dance practice, but movement in and of itself.
So, what are the challenges that society currently faces, and how can movement, dance, five rhythms contribute to resolving this or to bridging that?
Yeah, well, what a question that is. I mean, there's so many challenges, of course, and at the risk of not being responding in an up-to-date fashion to that question, one of the things that's not just obviously currently a challenge to the way that we live, but for some time, is the atrophy of our physical selves. In contemporary times, in modern times, there's this whole, and I guess for several hundred years now, there's this tendency to become less and less, to become more and more disembodied, to be less in movement, in physical engagement. And obviously everything that we experience, our mind, our feelings, all of our capacities are residing within the physical body. We have this in some ways really contrived separation between body, mind, and feelings. They really are all housed in the body, and they all have a physical correlative. Right? I mean, so my feelings take place and are intimately connected, related, and determined by how my body is. If my body is sick, my feelings, my thoughts will be ill as well. They will be affected anyways. It's challenging to keep. It's really not quite possible to keep them apart. So by us sitting on our computers, being on our phones, working with our minds a lot more and more and more. Not all of us, but most people who you and I know are not physical laborers, but people who use computers and their mind and their feelings. So now this atrophy of that goes along with our bodies not doing that what they're designed for. I mean, our physical self, we have legs to move, we have hands and arms that are designed to move, to hold, to lift. We're designed to move. It's the essence of our physical selves, and that essence is resonates in all of our capacities. It has an effect on our capacities, on all of our capacities, if we are not engaging them. There's an atrophy. If you don't use what you don't use, you lose. And I think the system in and of itself is probably not quite happy about that. And someone that's not quite happy about it probably manifests in psychosomatic symptoms. I'm not inspired if I don't move for a while. For each of us, for the listeners too, we can check this out. We know that if we don't move enough, we feel unhappy, and if we continue to not move enough, we feel less and less happy, and our bodies will suffer, and our minds and hearts. So the movement practice is, if you will, is attending to that, is turning to that. And so there's this saying that Gabrielle coined, and I don't know if I said this already or not, is if you move, if you let, the body will heal itself if you allow it to set itself in motion. And so there is this movement, that dimension of just the organism part of us that benefits from movement. But more than that, it's this, it's the taboos that in this movement practice are being addressed too, and are being allowed to be suspended. For example, during a movement class, men and women can be in their sensuality, can express their sensuality, and not just secretly, at night with the lights out at home, but in a group of many people who, grind their hips, let their sexual organs, all dressed, move about, have wide stands, take space with each other, and be loud, be strong, and it not being something to be afraid of, and or it being intimidating, because it is, as a part of a practice, it's the art of expressing through movement and body these different aspects of ourselves. So it's also the permission, allowance, the reconnection with parts of our bodies and movements of our bodies that are shamed, that are not allowed, that we even forgot about. That is very healing. It allows the whole spectrum of movement, and if you allow what's suppressed, there is healing happening. You experience more of yourself. You become larger inside of yourself. You're less judgmental about yourself and others. So it's healing for the own organism and the own psyche, but it's also healing in a communal way. You develop a capacity of much more tolerance of strange looking bodies and strange moving people, because you get an appreciation to all these different body types and these different movements. People who are obese, people who are thin, people who are weak, people who are small, people who are considered beautiful, people who are considered not so beautiful. They all move in the same room, and it's the beauty of the inside vitality expressing itself that's being experienced. And so that is only healing. It's very accepting and allowing for everybody in this room. You can see how there's so many levels of healing in that experience.
It's beautiful. And I've been experiencing that myself as well. So I can definitely share from an own experience that this sharing, this expression in connection with oneself and with others, that this is this healing and transformational aspect in power, just like expressing whatever is that is there without shame and guilt, and being witnessed in it and sharing it within a community. And now I feel it is such a powerful thing. I wanted to ask you, if someone is listening right now and saying, I want to integrate this more into my life, how would you say can people integrate this core idea of what you just shared into their everyday life, like without going maybe to a workshop or a class, but something that every person can integrate in their everyday life in order to integrate this aspect more, to embody more of their self? What would you say?
Move as much as you can. Move your body and dance as much as you can. There's just no way around the experience than having the experience. You can think about the experience. You can try to extract out of the what the experience would give you without having the experience, but it won't work. Like I only can teach if I really practice, if I embody this. But that may not be exactly what your question is aiming for. But some of the essences of this practice are, and again, you need to enliven them with doing the practice. But for example, what I experienced by myself is the suspensive judgment of other people. So I have this every time not every time, but often, less now, but in the past, when I'm in a room dancing with other people, there's this tendency of the mind to go, oh, I like this person, I don't like this person. This person is attractive, this person is not attractive. And a kind of a resistance or an aversion to some and an attraction to others in the room. And so many times I've experienced during the course of one of these sessions that people who had an aversion to in the beginning, my mind doesn't want to have an aversion, but kind of the conditioning is to kind of split people into like and dislike. So often I've experienced that people I had an aversion to ended up people I had the most beautiful dances with, and who ended up, of course, not being at all like I imagined them to be, but totally different. So it was this kind of this revelation of what how my mind projects, how it makes up stories about other people, um, and to see that those stories are just that is incredibly healing. For it makes for a healthy mind and psyche to know that you can't trust your projections entirely. That or if they come up and you believe them, you're hypnotized by them. Something in you knows from experience that they're not the entire truth. You know, it's you don't believe them 100% anymore, even though you may believe them in a moment. Something in your system knows uh, uh, it's not quite true. That's a that's a great lesson that I extract, that I take from this practice. And then another one is to allow myself physically, to allow myself having energy, and being tired, knowing that those are temporary um, states, that actually, when I allow them, they can move through faster. So um, it allows, one of the lessons from this practice is to um, to meet my state where I am with less resistance, because I know that if I submit to my state and experience it, that first of all, it wants to be, it needs to be, otherwise it wouldn't be there and it wouldn't be urgent or announcing itself. So rather than fighting my states, I rather allow them and meet them, knowing that they're temporary, remembering that they're temporary. We all know, but to remember in the moment that they show up, that's part of the practice. When you, in your system, in your nervous system, in your body, in your soma, experience that, it kind of settles as a not a derived mental knowledge, but kind of a more comprehensive, holistic knowledge in your system, where you remember more quickly that in your life off the dance floor, when you're in a difficult state, that it's a phase. It's not, it doesn't, you don't identify entirely with that particular state. It's part and an important part of your experience. So it can move through faster.
Thank you for sharing this. I find this like very, very practical and very hands-on, that people can, when they were listening to this, say, okay, cool, I want more of this in my life. And these are two ways that you shared, of probably many, many, how people can integrate these core ideas of dance, of movement, of five rhythms into their lives. And now I also wanted to ask you, if someone is listening to this episode, maybe in a couple of days or maybe in half a year, that how could they experience what you do? And before you share that, I can highly recommend experiencing Oliver's spaces. I've experienced them multiple times: facilitation, the dance, the classes. Then I experienced for myself so much liberty in dancing and moving, so much aliveness and so much connection with myself and others. And I just can recommend that to everyone as well. So if someone is listening, either in a couple of days or in a couple of months, how could they experience what you offer? Where do they find you? And where do your classes and workshops take space, for example?
Okay. So I'm based in Berlin, and I give classes two times, sometimes three times a month in Berlin, but also in Hamburg. I'm once a month in Hamburg. And then, I give retreats and workshops in different places, both in Europe and mostly in Europe, sometimes in the States. So, I mean, you can find me by I have on the social media channels, you can find me. And I guess the easiest way, if you Google Oliver Five Rhythms Berlin, you will get links to these different channels. And you can also write to me. Maybe we'll share my email address. That's usually a good way, and I'm very happy to answer questions or to link you up with the different channels. I want to be accessible. So if some of the listeners have a question, they can reach out to me, and I'm happy to share where, when, what it is, so on and so forth.
Amazing. Thank you, Oliver. And I really hope that many of you listening to this episode now got really excited, yes, I want this. I want this more in my life. So I'm going to write it down in the show notes as well of this description, of the description of this podcast episode. And you can contact Oliver directly. And as we're now coming already to the close of our session, I'm excited, I'm just blown away by how fast this time flew by. And that's always a good sign for me. I wanted to ask if there's anything else that you would like to share. Is there some kind of thought that you want to share, an inspiration, anything that's still on your heart? And if that's not, also totally fine. Now is also a moment for you if there's still something open or want to share with people listening to this episode.
Yeah, I guess I want to take that moment to just kind of reconnect with my body inside, and I feel there's something very trustworthy about the inner experience of the body, and so I guess what I want to share is that I want to encourage, based on my own experience, people to reconnect with their physical selves, with their inner physical selves, kind of, with your sensations inside when you, for a moment, close your eyes and you draw your intention inside and see where there's a part in your body that feels most accessible, and could be both comfortable and not so comfortable. And so I guess I want to put this invocation out there for myself and for others, that may we remember to connect with our inside body more frequently than we already do, and to trust that from that the healing is emanating. Just really to have a relationship with my inner self. And it may, to some of you, it may sound egotistical, but really by doing that, it increases one's capacity to be in the world in a more related way with oneself and with others. I think that beautiful insight that we all have is very, very healing to us and those around us.
Thank you, Oliver, for sharing your words. Thank you, Oliver, for sharing your insights. Thank you for opening these spaces where people connect with themselves, with their inner self, with their essence, with their physical self, with their inner world and landscape. I'm deeply honored and grateful that you were a guest here on my podcast and joined me and shared your inspiration with everyone. And I'm excited to hear from the people that are listening, that have been listening to this episode. What is it that you take from them? If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to Oliver if it's about Five Rhythms and anything that he shared, or feel free to reach out to me if there's something that you would like to share with all of us. So thank you so much, and looking forward to speaking and connecting with all of you in the next episode of Essence.